ending here soon, so if I get a little distracted, it's not my fault. Hello, YouTube. This is BUB'S Comics coming at you with the new No Faces comic chat. Not the new faces comic chat. Well, you wouldn't know if we had new faces. I don't know if DS got any work done over the weekend, but I'm sure it was an improvement. With us, as always, we have DS Comics. Say hello, DS.
What's up, everyone?
Fantastic. Next, we have Deadpool 2323 sitting in Roger's seat. I hope that seat's not too warm, but enjoy it nonetheless. Say hello.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's a perfectly cold seat.
Oh, we know about old warm rump Roger.
Yeah, Aaron, it's really awesome that you're here because Roger's not here, and you are the one that's had the most time on this show, aside from the three of us who are here every week. So it's really awesome when I heard you were going to be on here again.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I tell you, I wish I could do the show every week. It's so much fun, but and I wish I could do it more. I've actually BUB'S has offered it to me a few times, and unfortunately, I've had to turn it down because of work. And then I do have 4 children, and they take a little bit of my attention. So, but thank you. I'm honored that you say that too.
Well, you're welcome. I mean it from the bottom of my heart.
Oh,
thank you.
Shucks. All right. With Roger absent, we're all going to have to turn on the sappy charm a little bit extra because we'll just miss him so much. He's a good guy. We are really going to miss him. What did he say he was doing? He was he tagging whales off the coast, off the Atlantic coast?
I thought he was doing another chat show. I thought he found someone else.
That's funny. You know, no one else would have him. All right, we got Mr. Gretzky 9966 in the chat. We got the Gray Man's been waiting on here forever. Werewolf by lunchtime. We got to hurry up because he's probably got to go to work soon. We got Knights of Old saying hello, entertain me, and we're getting right on that. The Comic Collector saying what's up. We got the Hialeah Comic Bro. Hey, ¿cómo estás, mi hermano? And everything Roger says. And then we have the Gray Man still here, I guess. Yep, he's still here. And Area 51, Mike is in the house. You guys will have to help me stay on top of the chat, as that is Roger's standing gig. So help me out there. He's saying howdy to all and the panel. If I missed anyone, I'm sorry. There's a slight delay with my live chat feed. So Hialeah says not the same without Metarog. Isn't that the truth? Bad Dad's here. Say good evening. Hello. Mr. Gorell has made it in. All right. Well, the chat's heating up. Today, let's see. Oh, Aaron, you're pretty good at this. What's our team name today? Do you know?
Yeah, we are the spine-stressed long box lifters.
Yeah, I like it. Woo-hoo.
I like it.
All right, DS, tell us how much you hate it. Did we lose him?
I have no idea.
It's that Kentucky network we're on, I think.
Oh, yeah, I bet. So what do you think, DS? Do you like that name or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's all right. It's par for the course. I'll give you that.
I don't
it's
know
not worse than
good
the
or not.
ones.
I'm not. Same as always, just sometimes ain't no good, right?
No, it's good because I like the alliteration. So anything
right.
with even a little bit of alliteration, I like.
We'll take it.
And yes, fine stressed is sort of alliteration, so I'll go with that. It's good.
Yeah, and you like them to be informative, and now everyone knows my back hurts from time to time.
Oh, I thought you were referring to me.
No, surely not. Is your back hurting?
Well, not right currently, but I am old, so it's got problems.
Oh, you're not that old. If you're old, I'm just on old's doorstep, and I don't want that. So we'll keep you in young and fresh, and I'm almost as young and fresh as you. So we'll go with that. Now, Deadpool, he's old.
Yeah, it depends on the day. Some days I feel really young. Some days I feel like, how the hell did I get up today?
Yeah, the same for me exactly.
I know how I get up in the morning with momentum. I go, ah! And then up I go, alley-oop, just like that. Good stuff. All right, we got. Let's talk about our topic tonight. We're going to be skipping the ages, and that's only because it's a misspelling. I don't remember what I was trying to say. I think it was. Yeah, I think it maybe was skipping the ages. I don't know. Skipping the ages. What attracts you to collect one age and not another? So, and we're not talking about anything other than comics and all this. So I don't know if you like old dogs or puppies or anything like that. We're just gonna keeping it clean. Family show, as JB likes to remind us in his chat, rundowns that he does every day. So that's what we got here. Skipping through the ages, and why don't we start off? Let's see. I don't know. Deadpool tends to be long-winded. We'll start with you, DS, and we'll see. Hey, some people like a good hard wind, but so it's okay. It's all right, But we'll start off with DS, as he tends to be more curt than the rest of us. So go ahead.
Well, I feel like sometimes I'm not very curt. I can ramble on pretty good, unless you or Roger jump in. But yeah, so this is a topic that Bub, you and I discuss pretty much on a regular basis, sort of, just, and conversations. It always comes up when we're talking about books. And, I collect Golden Age primarily. Let me preface what I'm about to say by basically telling everyone that the reason I am focused primarily on Golden Age is not just that it's my passion among all the ages of comics, but it's because I don't have enough money to collect the other ones. If I was a loaded millionaire, I would be buying all the books in all of the ages, but I can't. And I made a decision a while back to focus on what I'm truly passionate about, my primary focus, and just stick with that if I really want to have a chance of having, high-end collection or, big grail type books. And, I've been more successful than what I had hoped for, but it pales in comparison to, other collectors out there. It's all relative, better than some, worse than others, satisfying as all. So, if the least favorite age for me, and this is probably an unpopular view, is the Silver Age. I used to collect. I know. I knew you weren't going to like that, Aaron. But let me get you back on my good side by saying that when I was collecting superhero stuff, I was collecting some Silver Age. It still wasn't my favorite, but I really love the X-Men books. X-Men was my primary Silver Age focus when I was doing, a variety of superheroes across the ages. Yeah, exactly. That's the one I never got when I stopped going after them. That was one I never got. That and 14 was like the only Silver Age run I didn't have out of X-Men. But, the Silver Age is the birth of the superhero, and it's extremely historically significant in comic history. And, there's awesome artists and writers. The thing, it's kind of hard for me to say why Silver Age is not my favorite or why it's my least favorite. I grew up with the X-Men, so I always love the X-Men no matter what age it's in. But I feel like the stories they're run-of-the-mill sort of superhero stories, which is what they're meant to be because this is the birth of the superhero, essentially. But I feel like some of the early Silver Age stuff, like even the X-Men books, they're kind of, the stories are kind of, I don't really want to say lame. I'm going to lose all kinds of subscribers tonight by saying this stuff, but
no, look, I'm probably
they're very simplistic and straightforward, and the art is phenomenal, and it's sort of like there's a predictability and a familiarity with Silver Age books after you read a few. For me, it didn't have, one was as good as the other. There's a lot of awesome heroes, great writers, and the art is fantastic, but there's just something that doesn't grab me like it grabs a lot of collectors of the Silver Age. And aside from the X-Men, which I was trying to put a whole Silver Age run of that together, I like Thor because Thor and X-Men were my two favorite growing up, so I always have a soft spot for both of those. So I had a Journey into Mystery run I was working on and an X-Men run, and that was it even when I was big into superheroes. I was really into Copper Age because that's when I grew up, and I really started to get into Bronze Age. And Silver Age, it just never grabbed me like the other ages. And then Golden Age is a whole other animal altogether, and I love that the most. So I just dumped everything else and I focused on Golden Age. So that's how I feel about the ages generally.
That's fair.
I have to agree with you with the storylines with a lot of the Silver Age stuff. I mean, the basis of all the movies, the basis of everything we know about our superheroes comes from from the Silver Age. But like, I don't think, other than maybe the first 15 X-Men books, the rest of them through the Silver Age really don't grab you, and they're really lackluster, and ultimately ended up getting the book canceled.
Yeah, right, exactly. They started that whole reprint run.
Right, and I'll say, Giant Size X-Men #1 in issue 94 up through issue 142 is a much, much, much better run than all the Silver Age stuff. I mean, for storylines, I mean, artwork. I mean, there's a lot of artwork I like. But I mean, John Byrne, phenomenal. But when it comes to the Golden Age, the thing I love about the Golden Age, why I love watching your videos, it's like the one you're showing right there, the Blue Bolt. That cover is just stunning to me. And the colors, the way they contrast with each other, the reds and the oranges and the blues, they just seem to have a different look than any other age. That's just my opinion, and that's why I could totally get into buying Golden Age stuff. So I understand what you're saying. I'm not mad at you at all, because I think the X-Men stuff's kind of
Yeah, I think even
story.
X-Men 1, which I read reprints of X-Men #1, the story is average at best, honestly. Now, it's a historically huge book, and if you're an X-Men fan, that's the grail for that title. But even X-Men #1, I read reprints. It's not that great. I really liked X-Men 12. That was probably my favorite Silver Age story, and I really liked the Juggernaut, and I liked the backstory, and that was a good one. But yeah, you're right. Once it hits when you get into the 20s and the 30s, it's just, I mean, they don't do anything for me at all. But then when you get to like 94 on, especially in the early 100s, man, that is killer stories. It's like now the superhero comic books have sort of gotten their footing. They've gotten some maturity, and they really turn on the heat. And it's like heavy duty, awesome, just great stories into the Bronze Age. And then even into the early Copper Age, the X-Men I loved. And the stories of the Bronze Age, once it hits like the early hundreds, like 100 through, God, I don't know, even up into like the 160s and 170s, I really was loving it. Those are my favorite. And it's the Bronze Age for a lot of these superheroes. Spider-Man too. I mean, the Spider-Man stories Silver Age are far superior to any other Silver Age stories superhero-wise. But Spider-Man,
we're going to have a big disagreement there.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, Spider-Man in the Bronze Age took a more darker, more serious tone. Also, it was more mature, and you can see that in all of them. All of the superheroes. Fantastic Four. I'm not a huge Fantastic Four fan, but I've read some sporadically here and there. That strikes me similar to X-Men as far as how the stories are. So yeah, I mean, I think once they sort of got some maturity and figured out what they were in the comic world, these superheroes and these stories and these writers, they really garnered a huge amount of interest. And the Bronze Age, it's a totally different ballgame, and I love it. Silver Age, it doesn't do a whole lot for me.
For storylines, I'd have to say the Fantastic Four first 75 to 100 books just sets up the entire Marvel universe. And some of the greatest story. I mean, everyone knows the Silver Surfer Galactus, but then you've got the whole Inhuman storyline. You've got the Fantastic Four storyline. You've got the early Fantastic Four stuff with King the Conqueror setting up Doom and their storylines. And I just feel like the first 75, not just from a key standpoint, because I'm a big key guy, so not just from a key standpoint for collecting and investment, but from a storyline as far as setting up the tone of the entire Marvel universe. I feel like that's the shit when it comes to storylines in the Silver Age. I think second to that, by a narrow margin, is Spider-Man. That's me personally.
That's fair. I mean, I think the problem with Spider-Man is that unless you knock out some of the offshoot issues, some of the Web of Spider-Man, the Ultimate Spider-Man, unless taking out some of those kind of off runs, if you just stick with Amazing Spider-Man and go all through the ages, it's one of those rare books that from Silver on really does hold value and is collectible all the way through its entire run, and still even modern books, if it's Spider-Man, it still sells, it's still popular. So I think Spider-Man is one of those different kind of characters that the entire publication history is more or less celebrated. So it's tough, and amazing writers. And I think if you were anyone that had that kind of talent in the industry, you probably at some point wanted to work on a Spider-Man book. So you end up, there's got a great run of talent going through that whole series. It's really, to me, a standout run, apart from the rest of the ages.
Yeah, and the Silver Age, the thing that drew me most to the Silver Age, for let's say X-Men, because I love the X-Men. The villains are what really got me excited for issues in early X-Men when I would buy the books and I would read through them. I was buying mostly all raw stuff back then, and then I would get it graded, but I was reading reprints of X-Men. They're easy to find anyway. But they had Magneto, of course, huge, and the Juggernaut was one of my favorite villains. And then they had the Sentinels also, but I feel like after that in the Silver Age, there was a lot of like lame villains in the X-Men that were kind of goofy looking, and they were kind of it's like they were struggling to find a good villain, and they've always relied on Magneto so much, but other than those, it's like the villains in the X-Men, they didn't do much for me after the first couple villains. They didn't really have a whole lot after that really caught me.
It's so funny that you say that, because I couldn't agree with you more. You hit the nose on the head. You had the Sentinels, great storyline, great villain. Juggernaut, one of the most classic villains in the Marvel universe of all time. And then obviously Magneto and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and the Blob. That's pretty much it for the Silver Age, right? I can't think of another villain in the Silver Age that really mattered.
No, they had other villains that were in the X-Men books, but they weren't like they got so hard up for villains. They had a Frankenstein one, they had a Dracula one.
Right.
Like, the Stranger, even by the time they hit that, it was like the Stranger is not a great villain.
No.
Although I really love that cover. What is it, issue 11, I think, the brown cover. That's a really killer cover.
Yep.
Yeah. But other than that,
But whereas Spider-Man had mega villain after mega villain after mega villain, you could literally do an entire want list for just Spider-Man villains out of the Silver Age. It didn't matter. Like the first 20 Spider-Man had villain after villain after villain. But then you had Molten Man later on, and then you had Kingpin, and it just keeps getting better. And then but Spider-Man kept it all the way up through into the 100s, and into the 200s, and then even into the 300s with Venom and Carnage, and it just keeps going on with Spider-Man. Whereas you're 100% right with the X-Men, the villains that I love came in the Bronze Age, and you take the Mystique and the Sabretooth, which kind of brings in the new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and then for me, the Mutant Liberation front, that whole Strife storyline, I really enjoyed that as a kid. But I totally agree with you. Like the villains in the X-Men, you had that first couple, and then it was like, okay, the rest of them were like, you never even heard of them. You had to I couldn't even really. You're right. You had the Stranger. You had the one called the Changeling.
Oh yeah, the Changeling. Yeah.
Yeah, and and it fools you. Oh, it's a Spider-Man's in this book.
Yeah, I know. That's like
no, he's not.
Yeah, and that's the most valuable one after the Sentinels.
Right.
That's the most valuable issue because it's got Spider-Man on the cover, and it's really not even Spider-Man on the cover, but it still is this drawing of Spider-Man. But
I would say after the Sentinels, most valuable one would be Banshee.
Was that 28?
Yeah.
I got burned on a J.C. Penney reprint of that years ago when I didn't know any better. I bought one. I'm like, man, this is in really great condition. And then, later on, I found out they had a J.C. Penney reprint. And went and looked at it. I'm like, God damn it, this is a J.C. Penney reprint.
Well, the aging they did on those covers to make them look authentic was that's not fair. Well,
I think it's not fair when you do a reprint like those J.C. Penney reprints. That Banshee one, X-Men 28, you cannot tell the difference by looking at that book. Now, even like the Star Wars reprint, it has the word reprint on it, or it'll have a little diamond in the little price box, or it'll have that little box on the lower left that says not for resale on some of these things. But those J.C. Penney reprints, man, there's no way to know by looking at it on a picture. It looks exactly the same. There's no difference at all. You have to open it up to check. And then, I didn't know any better, but I bet a lot of people have been burned on those J.C. Penney ones.
Yeah, I bet you.
Yeah, I almost bought a first Black Panther reprint. And the guy had it up on the wall, and he wasn't letting anybody touch the books or pull the books down or anything. Some dealers though they more or less like, hey, you want to come look? Go ahead, walk behind the counter and take a look. But this guy was real standoffish. Had his books like 5 feet back from the edge of the table where he was. And then I was like, I don't know. He had kind of a high price on it, but yet low enough that it would have been a good price if it were real, but way too high for a reprint. And I was like, I don't know, let me take a look at it. And I was like, wait a minute, is this a reprint? And he's like, yeah, but these are going for big money right now. I was like, get this out of here. I was mad. I was agonizing over whether I should buy it or not. So
yeah, and say what you want about grading. I mean, a lot of people don't like it. We're not going to get into the whole grading thing again. I feel like we do that every week. But one thing nobody can argue about is if you buy a CGC Blue Label slab of a book, that's the book you're getting. You're not going to be burned by it's not the right book. I mean, so that, say what you want about it, but it helps prevent people from being burned on buying a wrong book or an incomplete book or any other things, since most sales are done online.
And I'll tell you, the biggest fear for me with that is the golden record reprints.
Yeah.
The biggest fear for me is I go and buy a Journey 83, come home totally excited, and then whatever, find out later, oh shit, this is the golden record reprint that I just spent $2,000 on. Now I'm fuming, So I that's why, like with the big money Silver Age stuff now, I look for graded stuff.
Yeah, and another thing about the Silver Age, just to get back on that, finish my thought on it, I guess, sort of something else I thought of, but I've always been a big fan of visual arts. I like various painters, world famous painters, Van Gogh type things. I've always been a fan of art from a visual standpoint. So when my passion for comics is the visual art. Now, Golden Age is mostly cover collecting, so it hits me right in my sweet spot. I love the art. The Silver Age, for me, is not mostly about the art. It's the history and the characters, and it's goldmine for history of comic books. But my passion in comics is the visual art form of it. So I always like the art better than the history or the stories to own something for myself. I like all of it, but for visual art, that's why I like the Golden Age the most. Silver Age, the visual art does not match up to the history of it. All these new characters and just the history of the Silver Age. That's not why I collect comics, but I would if I were rich. I would collect visual stuff, and then I would collect the history stuff, and I would collect keys, and I would collect just whatever if I had the money. But you got to pick what I have to focus on something to have a chance of having a good collection of something. So I just go with Golden Age because I like the visual part. But not to knock the Silver Age, but I mean, it's chock full history of comics, and that's not my primary focus in collecting this art form.
Yeah, I think for me, the Silver Age, and that's on my list of ages that I don't care as much for. And it's funny because I didn't pick up too much modern stuff, but when I first started back collecting as an adult, I picked up. I just was kind of drawn to the bronze books, and then some modern books. So I had some modern books. I had some, a few copper, of course, which to me I more or less considered modern still. And then some bronze, and I fell really heavy into bronze, and I just fell in love with it because I was mostly reading at that point. I was picking up books, reading them as I picked them up, completing runs, reading them from start to finish. Wasn't selling very many books, and just keeping them all, in reader condition and reading through the Bronze Age. And there's just fantastic stories that link and intertwine, and it's just so much fun and such a good read. And so when I started, I figured I was moving back in time, right? So I started getting to the Silver Age, and the stories just didn't connect with me. I found the writing very clunky. I like the art encapsulated within itself, but there weren't those big, like sprawling splash pages that you got between the bronze and early copper, and they really started doing, 2 gate folds. And now you had some of that, and Steranko kind of pioneered a lot of that in the Silver Age, but it kind of really didn't hit its full kind of a cinematic breath across the page that the Bronze Age started doing. I really enjoyed that.
I think for cinematic breath, though, it's an underrated, underappreciated title is Thor from the Silver Age. That has the absolute most cinematic, just phenomenal, blow your mind artwork in the early Thors. It's not comparable to any other Silver Age stuff, which is sort of earthly grounded, like Spider-Man running around New York City, sort of, and Iron Man or Fantastic Four has some good stuff too. But Thor, the Silver Age Thor, came the closest to worth collecting because of the art alone. It's so good in there. There's a lot of double gate folds, double page spreads in Thor, and a lot of creative panels where there's some larger stuff, a lot of cosmic scenes, a lot of Kirby dots in there, a lot of really great stuff by him. And it's the Thor books in the Silver Age, they go for cheap too. I mean, you can get a VF random Silver Age Thor for like $15 or $20 these days. It's insane. But Thor is just like a desert for keys and first appearances in the Silver Age. There's nothing out there.
It's like the longest run.
Yeah, you have to just love Thor and love Kirby and love the artwork and the character and whatever, because there's nothing after the first couple. It's few and far between to find. It's hard to find a key, really. I mean, it's just super hard to find anything of historical importance in there other than they're just kick-ass books.
It's funny you say that, because so the other day I sat down and I went through. I kind of had what's my end game here? Like what am I trying to do? What's my bigger goal for collecting, right? And this isn't something like my end game I'm looking at a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years. I'm looking at 20, 30 years, whatever the case may be, however long I decide I want to collect for. But where's my goal? What's the list of books I want? And so I kind of put down all the major keys I wanted, and there were between the Silver and Bronze Age. There was none in the Golden Age. Well, there was a few, but they were very like I hit the lotto and money's not an object books. They were 99% Marvel. And when it came to Thor, there was two. Because I already have 126, which, is the big premiere issue from 68.
Right, yeah.
So the two was Journey 83 and Journey 85. And after that, there wasn't really a book that I was probably like the first Hella. I don't even know what number that is, to be perfectly honest with you. But after 83 and 85, there wasn't like another book that I even thought of. And and I'm still defining and whittling and stuff like that. But 83 and 85 was it. That as far as the big keys, that was pretty much it out of Journey. And even before the superhero stuff and Tales to Astonish, and me, I like to get the monster books, the pre-superhero stuff in the Marvel Silver Age. And you had the first appearance of Groot, which is a big key, but it's pre-superhero. You had the first appearance of Fin Fang Foom, which is a big book, but it's pre-superhero.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely
Right.
love that number.
So do I. It's two. I'm fortunate enough to own both books, and they're two of my favorite books in my collection. But you go to Journey into Mystery, and there isn't one. Same thing with Tales of Suspense. There's really not a book pre-39 that's turned into a big key over the years. But Journey, I mean, literally has those two keys, and then but if you're a Thor fan, you're probably disagreeing with me. You're probably saying every book in there's a key. But you're right, the artwork is completely different than every other book. You're so right on that. And I never really thought about it till you just said that, Diaz.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of keys, but if you're a Thor fan, I was trying to complete a Journey into Mystery run, 83 through 125, and I had about half of them. I didn't have 83 or 85. But, if you're into that run, the big books other than 83 and 85 are non-keys, but 112 is Thor versus Hulk. That's a big book in that run. It's not a first appearance of anything. It's just a battle. And then Thor versus Magneto is 109. That's one of the bigger books in that run too. So that just goes to show you how little there is in terms of keys when the big books, within 20 issues of the first appearance of Thor. The big books are Thor versus Hulk, Thor versus Magneto. The first appearance of the Destroyer is like 118 or something. That's not anything special. But if you're into that run, that's like it's cool. I mean, that's kind of a key-ish for that run. But then you get into 126, and there's like Ego is like 132. And not until you get to 165, which only recently is getting some attention because of the movies. But before that, that's not a major, really big, huge key either. I mean, that's the biggest one. But you're going from 126 to like 165. There's not much between those. And after 165, I mean, somebody in the chat can correct me, but there's not really much until, God, I don't even know.
Is it Firelord 225?
Yeah, but I mean, we don't even know what number that is. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's some minor stuff, but then until you get to like in the 300s, for all the way up until Beta Ray Bill, there's nothing huge in there. It's just good art and good stories, and it's Thor. But there's not like a ton of keys. It's hard to even come up with any, and that's hundreds and hundreds of books in a run. It's weird that that's like that. I don't know.
And the same thing could be said for Captain America.
Yeah, exactly.
After 100, you get 117, and then
you got 109. You got the origin retold in 109.
Okay, yeah, 109, 117. You got the first Vipers in there. It's a pretty big Steranko cover, and then King Size Hulk #1, the great Steranko cover.
Yeah,
but name me another big book in Captain America after 117.
Yeah, it's tough. That's another title that's just you really have to love the character and the story. And there's a lot of history throughout those. It's not to say that none of those books are important, but then compare that to Spider-Man. It's like from ASM 1 to ASM 361. It's nothing but keys. For 30 years, it's nothing but keys. It's insane.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's such a standout amongst comic runs that it almost deserves its own category.
It's kind of funny because now that you say that, after 361, there's not another major villain key, not another first appearance key. You have the 3 J. Scott Campbell covers, but not another big like villain or first appearance key after 361 that I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not into. I wouldn't know if there was one. If somebody told me, I'd be like, oh yeah, I know that one. But once you hit like 93, 94, that's when I got out of comics for a long time. So anything after that, I'm really not that familiar with. But the last sort of stuff that I was into was like, I remember Carnage, the McFarlane run, and then Carnage, and that was it. So there might be more after that. Spider-Man collectors will disagree with us, but yeah, I know what you're saying. But in Spider-Man, from the beginning on, there's not more than 10 or 12 issue run that doesn't have something hugely significant. And even if it's not a first appearance, they have major keys in the Spider-Man books that, like the Death of the Green Goblin, there's no first appearances in there. But there's, those 121 and 122 are major keys. And it kicked off the Bronze Age. And then, there's a whole bunch other in the Bronze. And, obviously Punisher comes. Yeah, so you've got 121, 122. And then 7 issues later, it's the first appearance of the Punisher.
Well, even before that,
you can't even go 10 issues without something significant.
You get 101, right?
Right. I didn't even go back that far, right?
Right, from 101 to like 134, you've got the first Tarantula, the first Punisher, the first Man Wolf, the first you got 119 and 120, which is 2 great covers and a great story arc with Spider-Man fighting the Hulk. I mean, it's just boom, boom, boom. And I tell you, you take a Silver Age, any just random Silver Age Marvel book, okay, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, X-Men, just any random book, not a key, just a random book from the Silver Age. You'll get 2 to 3 times your money for it if it's a Spider-Man book.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And when I started flipping books, a few years back to start making more money for my budget to go after bigger stuff, you learn early on in flipping what's good stuff to flip and what's not. And sometimes you're looking at a collection or you're out in the wild and you just got to wing it. You can't look it up. You just don't know. You either this is maybe or not. You just got to decide. If it's Spider-Man, it's always flippable, almost no matter what it is. And if it's something like Thor or like Silver Age Superman, Silver Age Action Comics, it's usually not even worth my time. Now, there's collectors of that stuff that love it, but I tried so hard to flip Action Comics from the Silver Age, and I'm like, man, this is good stuff. This has to be worth money. This has to be able to be profitable. And I tried to force it so hard, and it's so hard to do. But Spider-Man's another story. You can flip Spider-Man. You don't even really have to research it. Just sort of, if it sounds like it's probably a good price, just get it, and you can probably flip it and make a profit.
Sure.
I'm going to one up you there. I got a silver or a golden age Superman I can't sell.
Well, yeah, I had I had a Superman number 48, which CGC says it's the first time he travels in time, but I think it's actually not. But I had a nice copy. It was like a 3.5 or a 4, and I could not sell it to save my life. And I ended up selling it for like, what did I get? 150 for it or something? 120? It's insanely ridiculous. Nobody wanted it. I couldn't get rid of it. So yeah, I mean, there's hardcore collectors for this stuff, but Spider-Man sells. Everybody who sells books knows Spider-Man is the top of the list. And then Superman, you can't sell Superman. Now Batman, Silver Age Batman sells. That stuff goes. It's very liquid. Yeah. You can flip that all day long. But the Superman stuff, I gave up on it.
Yep.
And I've about given up on EC books from the Golden Age. I've been trying to flip some EC books, pre-code horror, but you cannot make a good profit on them because there's too many of them out there. So you learn as you go along.
With the Thor run, what I found with Thors are that if you get them in high enough grade and good enough condition, then they were flippable. If you bought them in lots, so I would pick them up in lots of 10 to 20, and in that lot, obviously pay a pretty low amount for them. Sell the smaller books that are in lesser conditions quickly. Of course, they're all kind of small books, like you said, no major keys. But if you got any of them that were in top condition, and sometimes in a lot of 15 or 20 books, you might have 5 or 6 that are really, really nice condition, shockingly nice condition, right? And then you could flip those and get all your money back and then some. So that's kind of what I would do with the Thor books. But in all those, I don't know that I kept any for myself. I sold I don't think I kept any for my PC. They were all just through the collection. Another one like that in the Bronze Age for me is Tomb of Dracula. That run was so easy to flip, and you could buy it in big lots. Because everyone was like, "Oh, does it have number 10 or number 1?" No, then I'm not interested.
Right, exactly.
Okay. But when you get that big lot of 15 or 20 of them out of the run, which is a short run, and then you sell, and then you find the high condition ones, those, and then list that separately, it actually sells better. So, and you can get more money than you paid for the whole lot, and again, make some money too. Or like I was doing then too, sell the high grades to the LCS, at 50%, 60% value, and scoop up the money. So it was working out pretty good. Those are 2 runs right there. One in the silver, one in the bronze. Very flippable that a lot of people just don't think are worth anything.
Yeah, for books to flip, there's basically three categories I look for. Keys, obviously, if you can get keys undervalued or in a lot, you can flip them because they're keys. The other one is high grade, silver and bronze, high grade. And for silver, if you can get in the 8s, is high grade. For bronze, if you can get in the 9s, is high grade. Then it doesn't matter so much if they're keys, but they're high grade, and people are filling out runs, and you can get a nice high grade. And then the other stuff is just anything dirt cheap or anything Spider-Man, essentially. If you have money to spend and you can't find anything really good to flip, but you need to fill out some inventory or whatever, go for dirt cheap stuff or go for Spider-Man.
Yeah, it's funny because there's a pawn shop I go to and buy a lot of comics from them. Or my LCS has been having some stupid deals. I would go there and buy comics. And, I'll go through the box and, as an example, Web of Spider-Man 100, the first appearance of Spider Armor. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll go and I bought 4 copies of that the other day for 50 cents a piece. I've never made less than $3 on that book, and sometimes I make as much as $5 or $6 when I sell it. But it always sells every single time. It just it's it's a dollar bin book, but you know, I find them and they're high grade. You know, I don't buy them if they're low grade, and they're good addition books to add into my sales. You know, and the point I'm making there is, you're so right with the Spider-Man stuff. If I can't find something I can make 20, 30 bucks on, then I'm going to look for 20, 30 books I can make 40, 50 bucks on. And
yeah, I mean, there's nothing
it's
wrong with
always,
buying a book for $1 and selling it for $2. I mean, if you can do that 100 times, you make $100.
right. And it's always the Spider-Man I'm able to do that with. But that has nothing to do with the ages.
It doesn't matter. The topics are just, you know, things to kind of get us started talking about. I'm definitely not making topics good enough for clickbait, so they're just stuff to get you interested, to kind of get the ball rolling, you know. And for me, like some of the ages we talked about, Silver Age, this was a book where every time I saw it, I thought, you know what? I don't get what the buzz is for that book. I think the cover is ugly. You know, no,
really.
Which book are you talking about?
Yeah. Avengers 57.
Oh, okay.
I don't like the 2-tone of it, or the 3, whatever tone. There's not much going on in it. It's not a true first appearance. It's a Silver Age first appearance. And the Silver Age is filled with a lot of quasi first appearances. And those always have irked me, you know. Why do you have this first Silver Age appearance? Because the Golden Age appearance is unattainable. Well, the character is different. Well, of course the character is different. It's been, you know, 15 years since we've seen that character. Of course it's different.
Well, it's about supply and demand, though. But I mean, if you are a Captain America fan and you want the first appearance of Captain America, you're not getting the Golden Age one for under 50 grand, and that's a beater copy. So it's not that the first Silver Age appearance is so historically significant, but people have assigned a little more importance to it because it makes it a little more attainable. And hey, if you can't have the first Golden Age appearance, you get to have the first Silver Age appearance. It is a distinct era. And
yes,
a lot of these Golden Age stuff tailed off and sort of disappeared for a minute, and then they were sort of resurrected out of the ashes like the Phoenix in the Silver Age. And so there's some significance to it. But yeah, I mean, a Cap 1 Golden Age, a beater, incomplete, restored copy is going to be, you know, 40, 50 grand. So you're not getting that if you're a Cap fan, but you can get an Avengers 104. You know what I mean? So that's where the significance comes to for that. But, you know, some like Superman, there's no break in it. It just goes straight through. There's not a first Silver Age appearance of Superman because there's no break in that story. Superman starts in 1938 and goes till now. Every single week there's a Superman something. And same with Batman. There's not like a first Silver Age appearance of Batman as a key because there was no break in that title. It just kept going straight through. But when there's a break or a tail off, like Captain America was failing after World War II because he was a World War II guy. After World War II, nobody needs a Captain America anymore. They turned it into like a monster horror series, and it just sort of fizzled out. And then when the superheroes came back in Silver Age, they revamped him, and he's essentially the same. But there was enough of a break that it added a sort of a novelty to him being back, and it's sort of a big key now. Where I don't even know what's the first Silver Age Superman or the first Silver Age Batman. But they're out there, obviously, but they're not significant because there was no break in that title.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely appreciate and like the Silver Age and especially the X-Men keys. I think we kind of went over Silver Age a lot. But I think that when I'm looking at something that it brings to the table that nothing else brings, I think almost all the ages, save for maybe some of the modern age, but I think almost all the ages bring great art. There's definitely top artists for each age and stuff that is appealing to me, you know, and catches my eye. So, you know, that's a little different. But when it comes to the stories, I just can't get behind them too much. And you know, the Golden Age stories can be a little bit much too, but they're really short. You know, they're like 4 pages or 8 pages and it's done.
That's an understatement, though. If you read some Superman stories from the Golden Age, they're lame. I mean, they're juvenile. They're made for kids. Adults would be embarrassed to even be caught reading one of those back then. And they're just the Silver Age superhero stuff. The stories are pale in comparison to even the Silver Age stuff is rock solid compared to that stuff. But I collect pre-code horror, and it's disconnected stories. It's sort of every book's an anthology, and it has 4 or 5 stories in it and some other little vignettes or whatever. And some of those are really good, and some of them are terrible. But the art is phenomenally unique. But yes, silver or golden age superhero stories for the most part are not that good, but they have a charm to them because they're so old, and they if you've never held a golden age book, they're larger than life. They're 64 pages, and they're thick, and they're magazine sized, and they have a certain look to them, and the art is like, even the way Superman was drawn was so simplistic, but it was striking for what it was in history. That's what's but the stories are terrible. The Superman golden age stories they're goofy. Most of them are goofy. The Batman ones too. I mean, other than the real early ones, they're kind of very noir. But when you get into the 40s and the early 50s, the Superman and Batman stories are goofy. They're like he's having pranks pulled on him, a chair pulled out from under him, and he's falling on his ass type stories. I mean, it's not a comic book story. You know what I mean?
To be fair, the Superman stories carried that on through the Silver Age. They're all goofy. They're almost unreadable in a serious manner. They're all and they were proud of how goofy they were. They threw it on the cover, and it was cover to cover cornball stuff for Superman mostly, in my opinion. It's still good stuff, but it has to be read with kind of a disconnected, turn off your brain and see if you can enjoy this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the Batman Silver Age stuff is pretty trippy, if that makes sense. It's not just goofy. It's strange and weird in a kind of a kooky way, and it's interesting. The Batman Silver Age stuff is very interesting to read through, and it's somewhat bizarre. The Superman stuff's not like that, but the Batman stuff in the Silver Age it's very strange sometimes.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the DC stuff, I think you can kind of autobiography a character by its artist and writer. And I think with the Batman stuff, it really took a turn when Neil Adams got on it. It obviously took a turn as far as the artwork's concerned, but I really felt like the storylines just drastically improved. Not that I've read a lot of them, but I'm going off of what I've read about people who have read them.
I like that.
Yeah, well, when you get into the Bronze Age, the stories, it became more acceptable to have a more darker, mature, adult-oriented storylines because adults were starting to be more into comics than they were in the 50s. So you'll see, like, people you don't ever see anybody getting killed in Golden Age Superman books unless it's Nazis or Japanese or Mussolini or something. But in the Silver Age, it's goofy too. But and you get into the Bronze Age, you start seeing people getting killed, villains getting killed, new anti-heroes. There weren't really anti-heroes before, Punisher, Wolverine. Then these start coming up more modern times. And Wolverine has no qualms about killing people. He's killed thousands of people. He just tears through crowds of people. He doesn't, what I mean? That would never fly in the Golden Age or the Silver Age. Even the villains in the Silver Age got bested, but they didn't get killed. So the darker storylines, when some of these artists like Neil Adams got on there, they were able to add sort of a darker tone, a more serious tone, a sharper tone to these books that wasn't culturally acceptable before. That's my view of it.
I love the Neil Adams Batmobile, which was more of a grounded kind of just sports car looking thing. Much less of a high tech, everything that you see now is, push a button and it's a full on tank. I just like the old Neil Adams Batmobile. I thought it was pretty cool. Or we're talking about that.
Knights of Old is saying Flash Silver Age is really cool. Yeah, I like Flash Silver Age. That was another run I was working on, was the Flash. I was going for the whole Infantino run, which was 105. Again, Bub, first Silver Age appearance of Flash, or first in his own title, not first Silver Age appearance, but 105 is picked up from the old Golden Age numbering, but 105 through like 175, that whole Infantino run, really love that. And he had some really trippy villains in there too, and the art by Infantino I loved, especially the covers on those things. They're really kooky and interesting. So yeah, I was working on a Flash run, X-Men run, and Thor, Journey to Mystery. Those were like my 3 key Silver Age runs I was working on at the time.
Infantino flashes are good. I had a lot of good flipping success with those too. Again, I kept a few. I have like 3 or 4 that I kept out of that run, but most of them are, if you can get a good Infantino cover, they sell pretty well in good condition. And he liked to use a lot of black. So he liked to do a lot of dark backgrounds, black tones in the background. So that made finding a higher condition copy even more valuable. Let's see. Well, we've got a ton of people in the chat, you guys.
We don't have Roger here, so we're not. We're just
I know. He usually starts from the bottom up, so I'll do that. We got Evan in the chat. We got Alex the Comic Quarter. We got Azkaban. We got Knights of Vol. I think we've mentioned him. We've got Pope's Cerebus. That's right. The first. We got. Let's see. That's pretty much good for a minute, I think. Gretzky's still in here. Werewolf had to bounce. Same thing for Roger. He had to cut out, but we thank him for joining us briefly. I'm sure he'll watch on the rewind or listen or whatever he does. And he's hoping him safe travels getting home and come home in the middle of the week. So good to have him. Count Von Strange too. Yep.
Yeah, Mr. Garrel and Comics Addiction as well.
Yes. Surly Tim's Fun Bunker came in too. So must be the 7 o'clock hour or close to it, and then people start rolling in. We get some fresh faces in the chat usually.
Yeah, so we didn't talk about Copper Age at all, but I mean, I grew up in the Copper Age, and I really love the stories and the art in the Copper Age. I feel like in the Copper Age, the storylines, they sort of like let it fly, and it was fast and furious all the time in all the titles. And there was a lot of changing of artists and writers, and they added a bunch of titles for the characters, and it was like, no holds barred. They just everything. They just went nuts with it, and I think that led to just the '90s decline. But the '80s, man, the '80s was some really awesome stuff across all the titles. Really, really good stuff. The first half of the '80s, particularly. So I really am fond of the Copper Age, but mostly because I grew up then and I remember reading that stuff, so I feel very close to it.
I feel the same way. When I started out reading comics as a kid, it was all Copper Age, of course, and that's where I grew to love Wolverine, and so I probably have more Copper Age in my collection than anything, considering my full run of Wolverine comics. So that's probably where the bulk of my collection actually is, even though I don't show them off very often. But other than just the enjoyment and nostalgia of reading those, I also liked the underground comic scene in the '80s. There's a lot of good, kind of codeless, kind of, maybe some risque stuff, if you want to call it that. But there's a lot of good comics coming out in the '80s too, that were kind of underground comics, really good stuff. And you don't see much of that either,
Yeah, and there was a lot of really good artists that worked on, like, '80s was sort of like the birth of, not the birth, but the expansion of independence. There was like the Pacific publisher. I really like stuff they had. The Dave Stevens stuff. He never did anything really mainstream, but he's one of the best artists of the '80s. Neil Adams worked on some weird stuff from the '80s too, and I can't think off the top of my head, but there's one that's like a vampire werewolf bat sort of thing. I can't even remember what the name of it was. Somebody might know in the chat, but you get some of these good artists on some of these independent things, and they have really interesting artwork, and they knew, I think, that they couldn't compete with the big boys, so they tried to sidestep that and come up with something unique, and a lot of them really did that, and some of the best Dave Stevens.
Hey, you're talking about,
they're really mainstream. People know him about the Rocketeer, but I mean, he did so much cool stuff in the '80s that he's not well known, but he's top notch.
Oh yeah, my Dave Stevens collection grows every week.
Yeah, I love when you show those Dave Stevens.
Man, I've got a ton of. I've probably got 20 plus Dave Stevens covers at this point. It's pretty almost an almost complete collection of his key works, but also some of the lesser known works too. And those PC books, just fantastic, and they grew a lot, I think, from to me a lot of the Golden Age work and the early Silver Age work, and they kind of just brought that to new artists and to a new feel. And the fantasy books from that age, from the Copper Age, are really nice. I really enjoy those. So
yeah, and Alex the Commodore, it says he has 2 Planet Comics one is Dave Stevens. Yeah, he did the Planet Comics is sort of a redo of the Golden Age title. You've got one showing there, and then there's Airboy. I think Dave Stevens did Airboy work, which was a redo of a Golden Age title as well. And then the fantasy stuff too. Yeah, the names escape me because they're not well known, and I'm getting old, so my memory's not as good. But whenever I see them on eBay, I click watch because I'm like, man, maybe I'll start picking these back up again. And then I usually don't, but they're interesting enough to me that they always still catch my eye, and they're really cool stuff. And they're cheap. You can get near mint copies of Dave Stevens stuff pretty cheap.
Yeah, DS is over there clicking watch, and I'm clicking make offer.
Yeah.
So
hey, I got to be careful. I'm trying to buy books that are way out of my price range, and the only way to do that is not buy anything else. So I pass on a lot of stuff.
So that's funny you say that, because you're talking about copper, and when I first got back into collecting in 2013, copper was where I was at. I was buying the New Mutants. I was buying the Wolverine run. I was buying the X-Men from the Copper Age. That's where I was at, because that's what I was collecting when I collected as a kid in the 90s. I was trying to buy the stuff from the 80s. I kept all my full runs that I have. I haven't sold anything from my full runs, but everything else I have from the copper and the bronze and modern, that's not a major key like my first Punisher, I'm in the process of selling. And I'm not selling it because I don't appreciate it or because I don't love it, because I do love it. I'm selling it because I want the bigger stuff.
Yeah, and that's a natural evolution I see with a lot of comic collectors. I'm at that point too. I mean, I'm way past that point now because I hardly even own any books anymore, except for books that I consider big for myself. But yeah, I mean, I had every single Copper Age key, all of them. I had all of them, and almost all of them in 9.8, except for like I had an ASM 300 and a 9.4. And I had an X-Men 266 that was probably a 9.2 or 9.4, but it was raw. I never ended up getting that graded. But everything else I had 9.8s, 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 9.8s. And I went nuts on copper when I got back into collecting. And I had an awesome copper collection. And I started to tail that off when I got on YouTube. So if you watch my early videos, you'll still see a lot of that copper. I kept just the big ones for myself. A lot of it's already gone at that point, but then I started selling off the rest. But what was cool is that the copper stuff I collected in 9.8 for cheap years before, cheap relative to what I ended up selling it for. I had a 301, ASM 301 in 9.8. Yeah, I didn't know it was going to be this huge book because it's somewhat rare in that grade. I got like $1,700 out of that. I had an ASM 238 that was selling for like $1,000. All these books I had in 9.8s just because I was a 9.8 snob for copper. Ended up a lot of them being worth a lot of money, and I put a lot of that towards Golden Age stuff to sort of kick off my collection. I bought some stuff to invest in. I bought some Golden Age Grails. But if somebody's just new getting into comics, copper is good because you can get a lot of keys in high grade, and you can do it with a modest amount of money, and you can put together a really awesome collection of keys and really rock solid collection from a single era. And that's what I did with copper. I never got there with silver because I was always collecting the later ones first. But with copper, I nailed it, man, because they were relatively cheap compared to everything else. You could pick up, the most expensive book is ASM 300 is probably the most expensive copper book of a mainstream, not counting Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or something. But even that's like in a 9.8 is 2,000. Now, yeah, that's a lot of money. But if you go back to Silver Age, you can't even get any of the first appearances for anywhere near 2,000. $2,000, you're talking like, I don't know, a 5.5 Fantastic Four 48 or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the money goes much further in the Copper Age, and it still does.
Well, so that's kind of where I'm at. When I got back into collecting, I was buying a lot of copper because one of the things I like to negotiate. I'm that guy. I'm the guy who, if you're selling it for 10, I want to offer you 8. If it's worth 10, unless it's a great deal at 10. But when I first got back into collecting with the copper, what I was finding, which is why I was getting so much of it as well, was there was kind of an abundance of it. So you'd go to an LCS or whatever, and down here where I live, there's a bunch of LCSs, and say you wanted that Wolverine #1, the black, not you know,
the one from 1988, the ongoing.
Right, the ongoing. Yeah. You know, well, you'd walk in and now that book's like, you know, $60-$70, but back then that book was $20-$25 all day long in high grade. But you could walk into an LCS and they'd have 5 copies.
Right.
And
I remember buying those for $5.
So you'd be like, hey man, you got 5 copies of this, you know, can I get a copy? Can I buy? I'd like to buy one for $10. And they'd be like, hell yeah, because you know they got 5 copies. They want to move the merchandise. And so with the copper, I found that I was able to do that a lot. The funny thing is today you can't really do that as much. You can't find a lot of that copper stuff. Now it's the 90s stuff, and later you're finding like that. But the copper stuff is starting to get soaked up. So I think copper's starting to take an uptick. And
it is.
And you know, so it's funny. One of my favorite YouTubers, ETA Nick, had a great segment a while back where he talked about why you're seeing such an influx in all these other Silver Age keys, specifically talking Marvel. Well, because the people who can't afford the ASM 15s and the Hulk ones have bought those, but they're the people who get to that point are continuing to buy it. So it's a pretty steady buy. There's no big hike. But there's a lot of people who can't afford that, but they want the big book. So that they're buying the Strange Tales 110 and so on and so forth. And so you see that uptick happening on that. Well, I think it has that analogy that he used is accurate in all ages of comics, because you got the guys who they can't afford the big Silver Age keys. So they're going to go after the bronze stuff. Well, now you look at the first Punisher, you look at the first Thanos, you look at a high grade ASM 122. Like those, the first Werewolf by Night, those big Bronze Age keys are starting to become unattainable for a certain portion of the collectors. And so with that, now they're going, well, I can't have the big keys here, but I can get the big keys here from the Copper Age, the first Gambits, and you know, and the first Venom. Well, the first Venom, because that movie took a big hike too. But you know, I think you're starting to see that where the Copper Age is starting to really starting to tick up, and I predict over the next 5 to 10 years the Copper Age is going to explode, because you know, the further away you get from it, like every age, the further away you get from it, the harder it is to find the books. The more people come into collecting that want to buy the books, and you know, for me with collecting. Obviously, if anyone who watches my channel knows, I'm a Silver Age guy for a multitude of reasons. But I think the biggest reason I absolutely love the Silver Age is because of a huge score I got. I wasn't a big Silver Age collector till I got that big. If you ever go back and watch my Silver Age hauls, that big score I got just got me so filled with adrenaline that I'm constantly looking for that next score. I'm constantly looking for that next deal where I find that huge Silver Age haul for $400. You know, it's the dream scenario where you walk up to a garage sale and you find that big score. And because of that, I had to look up all these books, and man, I just didn't realize what all there was in the Silver Age until I got that collection. And now, man, I've really, so there's 2 types of Silver Age that I really like to collect. I love to collect the Marvel huge keys. You know, there's about 40 or 50 what I consider huge keys of the Silver Age for Marvel. But then I also really like collecting the pre-superhero monster stuff from Tales of Astonishment, Tales of Suspense, and Strange Tales. And Amazing Fantasy. When I can pick that stuff up cheap, I like to.
Yeah, those have got kind of out of reach all of a sudden. You know, it's like people are collecting all the titles that turned into superhero titles, and they're just plucking them off. Like, oh, this is the book where Thor eventually appears, so I'm going to pick up all the early issues too. That's like, really, there's 82, you know, or so copies there that really other collectors who don't care anything about Thor would love to pick up, but instead, you know, it's kind of making everything running up to that a minor key.
It's funny because when I finished last year, I finished my X-Men run. And so, you know, that was a huge accomplishment for collecting for me. And so I didn't take any time off I just started buying Major Key. If you look at the second half from June of last year to January of this year, I was I just hit Major Key after Major Key after Major Key for me. And you know, I was looking at my collection. I'm really satisfied with the direction my collection is going in, but I felt like I was missing something. Like, you know, there's still something I should be doing. And it was, I wasn't chasing a run anymore. I was just investing in collecting keys, and I really like to collect a run. So I said, okay, well, what run do I want? Well, I have all the X-Men runs. I mean, I have every run in every X-Men book up through the 90s. So I'm like, all right, well, there's nothing X-Men more that I want to buy. I don't want to buy the modern X-Men stuff. I don't have the runs really into the 2000s, and I don't want them. So I said, you know, I had a really good start on Tales to Astonish. I mean, I own a Tales to Astonish #1 because I got it in that Silver Age haul, and that's probably the hardest pre-superhero book to get. So I decided to start going after the Tales of Astonish run. So I started collecting that, and if you look at a lot of my runs this year, end of last year and beginning of this year, I really nailed a bunch of the later Tales of Astonish stuff. Man, I cannot find the pre-superhero Tales of Astonish anywhere.
Yeah, they're all scooped
Well,
up. That's what
I'll
I'm
tell
talking
you from the standpoint of a Golden Age collector, I'm looking at the Tales to Astonish from one end of it, and the Silver Age superhero people like you, Aaron, are looking from like the other end of it. And I'm collecting pre-code stuff, and then the Golden Age ends, and right early Silver Age, which is still sort of Golden Age related, is like Tales to Astonish, Tales of Suspense, Journey to Mystery, and all of a sudden they're just random monster stuff with sort of the shock value taken out by the comics code, and then people are going nuts over the first issues of these titles. And from the Golden Age standpoint, I'm like, what is the deal? Why? I mean, why? There's nothing. Those are worth less than what the Golden Age was because they pared it down because of the comic code authority. But it's just down the road, you end up getting Thor and Iron Man, and but there's people that are going back, like you have discovered it and are going back, and you want that first issue of that run because these people who are going after Tales to Astonish #1 are people that are initially collecting the Silver Age superhero stuff. They fill it out and they want to expand, and they go back to try to get the whole run of that title, and that adds a ton of value to #1. It's sort of strange from my standpoint to see so much money being spent on a Tales to Astonish 1 or a TOS 1 because there's nothing significant about #1 issues in titles like that in the Golden Age. The #1s don't carry any significance in the Golden Age, non-hero stuff like horror stuff and monster stuff and sci-fi stuff. Nobody cares about a #1. But then you get to some of those pre-hero monster stuff, and they're big money, and it's because the Silver Age superhero collectors are going back to try to get those now. And it's sort of weird to me to see that. It's strange and interesting to see the values on those first issues from my standpoint because they're nothing special for what they are from the back end. But if you're coming at them from the front end, they're major books. So it's just sort of a dichotomy between collectors.
It's kind of funny because like I literally pulled up eBay while we're sitting here talking. Tales of Astonish #2 is on my wish list for this year. I have a 1. I want a 2. High grade raw 500, low grade graded 800, which is kind of funny. And then there's one that is actually an auction, and it's something I would even consider. It actually looks like it presents pretty well. It's starting bid 150, and of course there's 7 days left. But then you start going through it, and it's got a detached cover. and I'm like, okay, it says it's complete. All right, but it's starting bids 150.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to spend 150 on that book,
Well,
and I mean, I wouldn't mind spending 150 on that book, in a certain condition. A 2.5, 3.0, I'm okay with. But this looks like a 1.0, and it's just. But again, there's not a lot of them on there. I mean, I think I saw 4 copies. And all the way up through that series, through the pre superhero stuff, and the Tales to Astonish. And to be fair, I don't generally look up the Tales of Suspense stuff because I'm not currently collecting that run. I'm collecting Tales to Astonish, but it just gets harder and harder and harder to find that pre-superhero stuff in a decent grade and affordable. And it's kind of funny to me because some of the stuff I'm like, I agree with you, DS. Like, why would I spend $800 on Tales of Astonish #2?
Right. Yeah.
That's graded a 6.0. When I could buy a pre-code horror book for around the same price, that's harder to find. It's rare and I think looks better. You know, like your Blue Bolt. I don't honestly know anything about that book, what it's worth, what you paid for it, what the cost of that stuff is. But I would rather spend $800 toward that book than I would toward, Tales of Astonish #2.
Well, $800 of this will get you about a third of the book. So you can buy the first third for $800, and then you can buy the other 2/3 for $800 each too. So that's the difference when you go back. Yeah. So you go back from like 1956 to the early TTAs and go back to 1951 when this book is from, and all of a sudden it's like insane. Now I've got this at a deal from a seller in the UK. I had it raw, and I think he priced it high compared to other stuff he was selling. But a lot of times these UK sellers don't know, they're behind the curve as to what's hot in the States. And the way he priced this was a freaking like a steal. So I jumped on it, and it was a decent amount of money. It was several $100. But, now it's a $2,500 book. So, he didn't know that at the time because in the UK it's not hot. But here, that stuff's red hot. It's an LB Cole cover, and it's extremely hard to find. There's only like 6 of these on the census, I think, something like that. So, but yeah, when you got this stuff and then you get into like after the comics code and that pre-hero monster stuff with all the double letters and all the monster names, it's like they pay all
their consonants for like 5 letters.
Right. And some of them are really cool. I really like the early TOS stuff. Like the first 10 to 15 issues are really hard to find, and they have really cool Ditko and Kirby stuff on them. And they're cool, but when you go pre-code horror and then you have the CCA and then it gets sort of a little bit more tame, and then you see a TTA 1 going for thousands of dollars, and I'm just like, wow, I really don't get it. But I get it because later on, that's a superhero major Silver Age first appearance, and people are going back trying to collect that run. And the mindset of the superhero collection is first issues, first appearances. Those are big. So if you're coming at it from the front end with the Silver Age, going back to it, that first issue is key, and it's just interesting to see it go for such a high price. But they are hard to find, and especially those books are so hard to find in good condition. I mean, you're talking one with a detached cover. They want 150 starting bid. Those books are hard to find. They're pretty rare. Those early TTAs and TOSs are tough books to find, especially when you find them. They're usually beat. If you can find like a mid grade of those, that's a good score.
And to that point, they weren't truly Marvel books at that point. They were, I believe, Marvel Atlas.
Yeah, they were Atlas.
Yeah, and then when I don't know the exact history of it, but I think it's when Stan bought it and changed the name to Marvel, was somewhere around the 20s, and then that's when he started to do the superhero stuff. But yeah, I mean, you're right. So when I bought that Silver Age collection, the book I was going after that they advertised, the only book I knew they had was Tales to Astonish #1. And they advertised it for $50. And so, I just jumped at it because if nothing else, I felt like, this is a book that I may never see again. And I took it to 2 of the biggest stores in the Tampa Bay region and asked them about it. And both stores said that, and both these stores been 20, 30 years in business. And they both told me, the owner of the one store and the manager of the other store said, they've been doing this for a guy, however long they've been doing it, through the resume at me. And then it was the first time the book ever walked in their door.
Wow, yeah.
And so I was shocked. I mean, my LCS owner, who's been doing this, his dad owned an LCS, and he worked at his dad's shop when he was a kid, and he's 10 years older than me. So you're talking, he's been in the business 35, 40 years at this point, and he's never seen one ever walk in his store.
Yeah,
So
that's impressive, man. And the Journey into Mystery is the third one of those sort of Marvel pre-hero monster.
yeah, it's well, there's four of them, right? You got Strange Tales, Journey into Mystery.
Strange Tales. Yeah, Strange Tales.
Tales to Astonish. I think, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say the first one was Strange Tales, and then Journey into Mystery, and then Tales to Astonish, and then Tales of Suspense.
I don't know. I mean, those are not Golden Age books, so they're not like. I mean, I guess the Journey into Mystery and the Strange Tales have Golden Age stuff in them, and the other two don't. So Strange Tales and Journey into Mystery are definitely the first two. And some of the pre-code stuff is okay, but in the pre-code horror arena, the Atlas stuff is lower tier pre-code horror. It's only when they put the kibosh on all the pre-code horror and those titles survived that they become the, sort of the only fish left in the pond. But before that, they were the small fish in the pond, and they're cheap. The only thing cheaper than that would be like ACG stuff, which is really bottom of the barrel PCH, and it's still really cool, but just price wise, the Journey into Mystery and the Strange Tales stuff, it doesn't sell very well. The pre-code horror stuff. It's not very sought after. The Atlas stuff. I mean, a couple of the Atlas here and there, the Bill Everett covers, the Manili stuff, are rock solid and they sell decent compared to the other ones. But for the most part, before the Comics Code, the Journey into Mystery and the Strange Tales, they're not very sought after, and they're not expensive. But then when the Comics Code comes in and you got Silver Age collectors going back to get them, some of the first issues become very expensive.
Yeah.
But pre-code horror fans are not looking to get a Journey into Mystery 1. That's not even anywhere. That's not even my top 100 for pre-code horror. None of the Strange Tales are on my list. There's some other Atlas titles that are like Astonishing 30. Some of the Mystery Tales stuff is cool. Mystic is a really cool Atlas pre-code horror title. But those all ended with the Comics Code Authority, and they just, the four big ones we're talking about went on.
Yeah, I wanted to make Atlas my focus for Golden Age and pick up just a nice solid run of some Atlas books, but the ones I wanted looked like they were high priced for poor condition. They're kind of more like novelty books. They weren't amazing covers. Some of them I really liked, and others I was just cool on. So trying to pick up a run of that just wasn't going to do it for me. And I had the run itch, like Aaron was saying. I get the same way. I'm like, oh, I'm picking up all these keys, and this is great, but I really missed hunting a run. So that's why I pulled Atlas books.
The runs in the Golden Age, like the area I'm in, like non-hero stuff, like pre-code horror, nobody's collecting runs. I mean, you might collect a set, like the whole LD Cole Blue Bolt set is sort of like a run. But then there's one in there that's a Basil Wolverton cover that, I want the Blue Bolt run, but I don't want that one because it's not a Cole cover. So I really don't want the Blue Bolts. I just want the Coles. And then the Atlas books, I don't know any pre-code horror collector who's working on a run of Atlas books of any of the titles. There's select ones that have fantastic cover art that those are sought after, but you get back into pre-code horror, there's not really runs. Now, I collected one run of pre-code horror, and it's The Thing, and it's 17 issues, and I have them all. And I was working on a Chamber of Chills run, and I just stopped because I sort of brought the run collecting mindset back with me from superheroes, and it doesn't really apply, and it costs a lot of money to get stuff that's really not that good for what it is. I mean, most of the Chamber of Chills books have, less than stellar cover art. Why am I going to spend all the money on all those? So I just pick and choose now. And that's what most pre-code horror collectors do, is just pick and choose specific books. It doesn't matter what title it is, but if it's a really good cover art, then it's a good book. And then when Comics Code comes, now that's what I'm saying. Like, from my standpoint, a TTA 1, the cover is not spectacular. There's nothing about it that draws me. But if you're coming out from the other end with superheroes and you want to collect a run of that leading up to superheroes into the Silver Age and keep going, that's where the value comes from. There's no pre-code horror collectors putting out money for a TTA 1 or a TOS 1. None of them. Or a Journey 1, right. Strange Tales 1. Off the top of my head, I couldn't even tell you what the cover to Strange Tales 1 looks like. Honestly, couldn't.
I'll be honest, I couldn't tell you what the cover to any of them looks like until I saw that girl advertised TTA 1 on Let Go for $50. But I knew for $50 I was making a hell of a deal there.
Oh yeah.
It ended up costing me it ended up costing me $100, a pack of Newport Menthol 100s and Pepsi.
Yep.
I'm not lying. I'm not lying, DS. I am not lying.
That's a good deal.
I knew I was dealing with a very classy person when the deal negotiated included the cigarettes and the soda.
Well, if
the tip-off was the mentholated cigarette. The menthol, you had it right then.
Yeah. If anybody wants a cool Atlas title, like a pre-code Golden Age, pre-code horror Atlas title, which is Marvel, before the comics code, like solid, look for Mystic. That's my favorite Atlas pre-code title, is Mystic. They're sort of hard to find. They're all really awesome. And if I were going to collect a run of any of the Atlas titles, I would try for a Mystic run, because that's a really, really cool title for Atlas. The other Atlas titles, there's a couple here and there. But the Mystic run for Atlas, as far as pre-code horror goes, not super expensive. They're more expensive than Bronze Age regular stuff. But, they're worth looking at. If you want some good pre-code horror and you don't want to spend a ton and you want rock solid stuff, Marvel, good stories, really good cover art, Mystic is the Atlas title I suggest from a pre-code horror standpoint. So I'll just throw that out there.
Thanks. Sounds good. DS, I'll just throw out those recommendations for other people to spend their money. And
well, I don't want them going after LD Cole and stuff like that. You know what I mean? That stuff's hard enough to find. There's enough competition for that stuff.
Definitely. I love how different our collections are.
It's funny because between the three of us, we do have quite an eclectic collection.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why you're perfect sit-in. Not that you're sitting in for Roger, but he's not here and you are. But you would have been here regardless, probably. But you've been here several times. But you're perfect because Bub has his stuff and I have my stuff. And we got you on, and it's like having Roger. It's a completely different type of collection than we have. So it works perfectly with you on here, just like it does with Roger. Because it's always nice to have three totally different type of collections. Get three different perspectives on things.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I appreciate you joining us tonight. And somebody in the chat, I don't remember who it was. I have to go back through. Was talking about that they went to buy a collection. Might have been Comics Addiction. I'm not sure. They went to buy a collection, and the person said didn't want them to look through it, and said take it or leave it. And I was just thinking, it's funny because that could really work for the right person, but is a total backfire for another person. Like, DS, you may be able to see a Golden Age collection, and from the first 4 books that they show you, you want everything in the box just in case. I would feel the same way about several collections I'd look at. Aaron probably feel the same way about a collection he might look at. My goal is that if I ever pass away, that if my wife outlives me, is what I'm trying to say, or my son, then I want them to be able to sell my collection as a whole, and not have to piece them out and go through all the work of separating them. I want it to be a collection that almost anybody would look at and say, you know what, this looks like some good stuff. I'll make you an offer for the whole thing. So
yeah, well, I don't buy a lot of lots, but I have bought lots before, obviously, and probably 10 to 12 like legit lots before. So not that many, but what I've done on occasion is there'll be several boxes there. I'll look through briefly the first box, and I'll thumb through just quickly, because you can get an idea of what's in the collection without looking at every single book. And then I'll usually just be like, look, instead of looking through all these, I'm just going to take a risk here, and I'll give you, $75 a box. And usually the person will be like, yeah, that's cool. Like, you don't want to look at them? I'm like, yeah, I can look through every one. And then, some of these boxes I'm not going to want to pay for or whatever. But, let's just save time. I'll give you $75 a box. And you can get an idea pretty quick in a collect. It's not going to drastically change in the later boxes. I mean, people that collect stuff have a very similar collection in grade and the type of stuff they like. And if you're flipping through the first box, just random books in there, and you see a lot of bronze superhero. Second, there's a lot of bronze superhero and a couple silver. That's a bronze with some silver sprinkled in, and there's probably some copper sprinkled in. You pretty much know what you're going to get. And it's always cool if you can do that. And then you don't look at them all until you get home, and then you flip through, and then it's like the hunt through a long box at a con or something. except you already own them all. So you're really hoping even more that you find a key. And it's always cool if you find any key because you already paid for it, you already own them, and then it's like a surprise. You know, I don't know. I've done that before. I like doing that. I like making offers on lots if it's affordable, and then look at them later after you get home with them and hope this, you know, see what you do.
I totally know what I did that with the Silver Age. I didn't want to go through it because I knew I didn't have the money to pay for it.
Right.
What the value was, and I didn't want my face to give anything away. And so I just kind of flipped through it a little bit, and I saw the first appearance of Groot, and I said, all right, I got to buy this. I got to buy this now. And so I offered her the $100 and you know, and then we ultimately settled on that particular portion of the lot for 200. It was a 2-day thing. And yeah, I'll tell the story some other time, but the only other time that I've ever been able, well, there's 3 collections I bought where I didn't pay for, or I didn't go through the books before I bought them. And the one was about 12,000 books, and I couldn't go through 12,000 books.
That's impossible.
But I bought it for $400.
Well, almost no matter what's in it, it's a good deal then.
Right. I mean, I think I paid 7 cents a book. And then, and that's what buying that collection is how I was able to buy this book right here.
Yeah, nice.
And then the other one was when I was with Roger and I went to a garage sale, and I beat Roger to the garage sale. Felt bad for this, and I beat him to the garage sale, and I was the only one there. No one else had showed up yet, and I said, "I understand you got some comics." He goes, "Yeah," and he had 3 trunks of comics, and I knew there was a Secret Wars 8 in there because he advertised, and in his advertisement there was a picture of a Secret Wars 8, and I offered the guy $100 for all 3 boxes, and he said, "Yeah, I don't care." He bought a house, and he was trying to fix up the house, and the books were in the house, and there was 21 copies of Secret Wars 8, all near mint. So. Yeah. You know, it was kind of funny though. There was only one other key in the whole thing. It was 21 copies of Secret Wars 8, and then 1 copy of the first appearance of Killer Croc.
Yeah, I got a guy that's got a lot. He says he's got like 4 or 5 boxes, so hopefully gonna look at it this week. But I'm not planning on. Honestly, at this point, I don't want to look at every single book in a lot and add them up. I mean, that's not how you buy lots. I will look. You know, I'll just thumb through quickly to, you know, each box if he's got 5 of them, and I'll get an idea of what's in there. And then I'll just make an offer, like a per box offer, that's fair to him who wants to get rid of them, but leaves me a lot of room to make money on them. And also, it's, you know, you can't complain about, well, you only gave me this much. Well, I don't even know what's in it, man. I'm taking a risk. You know what I mean? It's easier for everybody. He gets money. He doesn't know. He's like, you know, there's nothing good in there. He's going to find out later. It makes the seller also feel better about it, I think. And it's also, you know, you get a good deal if you get an idea what's in the collection, and you can just buy it for, like, you know, $50 a box. I think 50 to 75 a box is good if it's like legit bronze stuff. Even you know, Silver Age, if it's all like Silver Age collection, I think $100 a box would be a great deal. But you know, I'm not some master like dealer and buying lots left and right, so I don't know. I'm just winging it. But you know, I feel like $50 a box, if it's not all like X-Force 1. If it's like, you know, bronze stuff, some copper stuff, $50 a box is a good deal, almost no matter what's in there. So you can't go wrong. And if it's legit stuff, you know, $100 a box is good. And you get 150 in a short box, and you know, close to 300 in a long box, because there's usually always some room in there. But
unless you're Roger, then there's 600 in a long box.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's like a long box ninja. You know, but most people have long boxes, and you know, there's 300 in a long box. I've yet to see a long box have 300 in it. When I go look at it, there's always room to flip through. You never have to pull some out to make room. It's always, you know, there's some room in there. But you know, I don't buy a lot of lots. I would buy more, but honestly, I don't even know how. If you have a store or you're a dealer, people will come to you more often. And other than that, you need to advertise. But just through connections, you can find lots. So that's how I usually find them. Somebody knows them in the comics, and they're like, "Hey, talk to James," you know, whatever, and then I'll go look. But it's few and far between. It's like once every year at this point where I see a lot.
It's funny. I actually had someone tag me in a Facebook post the other day. A girl I used to work with, she retired, and she was at an auction house, and they were selling comics. And so she tagged me. I didn't even know she knew I collected comics. And they were selling boxes of Marvel comics for $7 a piece.
Wow.
For a short or long box?
Short boxes
for
of comics.
$7, I wouldn't even look at them. I'll be like, how many do you have? You know?
Right.
Yeah,
So I wasn't there. But there's another one coming up on Memorial Day, and I plan on going to it. And if they're $7 a piece, and especially if they're copper or Bronze Age stuff, if it's Marvel and it's copper or Bronze Age for $7, I'm buying every one they have.
You know, even if it was just all stuff later than 2015, I would pay $7 a box just for like, it's like buying a scratch off ticket for $7. Maybe there's a $20 book in there, you know?
Yep. Oh, I'm with you.
You could just sell them off like, 10 books for $1 to somebody who wants to read some cool stories.
Oh, I got
you'd still make money on it.
I got you beat on that. I got a pawn shop that'll buy him 25 cents a book from me.
Oh, well, you're golden for $7 a book.
Right.
Let him fly.
Yep.
All right, guys. We're gonna probably wrap it up now. We've been rambling on for a while now, which I enjoy, but I got other stuff to do. So thank you guys for being on. As always, great topic, I guess, or great discussion tonight, regardless of the topic. It's always good stuff. Talking about the ages, talking about things we collect and why, and really some of the differences between them. But I think overall, since we have such vastly different collections, you kind of find that that's why comics are for everybody, because we're definitely coming at it from different perspectives, and yet we've all had a lot of these comics kind of run through our fingers, and and either we used that to get other books we were more interested in, or we kept them and we keep them on hand. So it's pretty nice to see that variety through all the ages and all the things to appreciate, stories or art, interior spreads, whatever it may be. It's really nice to talk to you guys and be able to share kind of our giddiness when we come across some of these books. So thank you for doing it. I really appreciate it.
Oh man, thanks for having us.
Yeah, fun as always. I absolutely love it. This is still the highlight of my week for comic stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it, guys. And Aaron, we'll have you on again, of course. I don't think we can keep you off, so it should be it should be good. I remember you had been on a couple times last year, and I remember at the turn of the year watching one of your videos, and you had got your new headset that I think use in almost all your videos now.
Yeah, I do. I'm wearing it right now.
And really good for the chat. And you had mentioned that this was good for the No Faces chat, and you hope to be on again. And I was like, well, yeah. I mean, anybody buying equipment, yeah, you're in. Diaz
it was a subliminal message.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm down with that.
Yeah, I bought lamps and a laptop, and I moved into a new comic room. I'm trying to stay on this show. I feel like for a while there, I was on the outs, man. I was there, like him and Roger were like, man, do we really need this DS guy?
Quit it.
Such low production quality, man. He's holding us back.
Absolutely not.
But I stuck with it, and I added some tech, and I'm good to go now.
Don't believe it. We love you, man. All right. So let's wrap it up from on behalf of myself. Well, we'll go around the table because I really like Aaron's closing line. So, Aaron, go ahead and say your goodbyes.
I just want to say thanks to everyone having me on the show. Roger, I missed you. Hope to talk to you soon. And as always, guys, collect what you like. Don't apologize for it. And happy hunting.
Nice. Go ahead, DS.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks for being here. Really good chat again. Aaron, awesome to have you here again. So everybody do your homework, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you. And Roger, you're sorely missed, and we'll catch you next week on the No Faces Comic Chat. And everybody go read a comic. Thanks. Bye.